So today's topic is about rebuilding self-confidence after you've had a major loss. And while I usually am focusing on, death-related losses, this lack of self-efficacy can certainly arise from any kind of loss. And I wanted to share briefly what I feel are some of those sources of that. It's a very universal experience. So if you're feeling like you don't trust yourself as much, or you're having trouble making decisions or doubting decisions that you've already made, I want you to know that you are not alone. In fact, we focused on this topic this week in my Awaken online grief support group, and there wasn't anyone who said, I haven't experienced this. But after doing a little bit of inquiry and journaling, I feel like most people felt like they had a lot more self-compassion and some more skills in terms of addressing future decisions and feeling more confident in themselves. So in terms of why we feel this way after a loss, number one, our assumptive world, the ground, the metaphorical ground beneath our feet, at least, has been disrupted. And that in and of itself, I think, can make us not only not trust ourselves, but not trust the world around us. Not to mention the myriad of mental, cognitive, and physical symptoms that come with grief, including that felt sense of depression, and whether it's an actual diagnosis of depression, which is different from grief. We might feel that depleted energy, depleted focus. Being able to think clearly is certainly challenged after a major loss. Also, if you're feeling isolated or lonely and you're having to do everything yourself, that can be hard because, let's face it, in the real world, we need to lean on other people for a lot of different things. Not always, but sometimes reaching out to a friend, a compassionate advisor, a mentor, or therapist can help us reality check our doubts and concerns. And then there's just that sense of identity that gets challenged after a loss. Who am I now is a big question that you might not be having right after the loss, but for many of us certainly shows up at some point because our roles change, our relationship changes. So those are some of the whys. But what I really wanted to give to you today are the hows to cope with this. And I think one of the first things we can do is understand and accept that we are grieving, and that while we are grieving, it's going to be very hard to make some decisions. It's going to be hard to get everything done. That this feeling of self-doubt is normal, and just wrap our entire experience in some self-compassion, knowing that you are not alone and that this is not an unusual experience, even if it is a painful and uncomfortable one. Even if it's something you don't want to have, there's nothing wrong with you if you are feeling this way. The second thing that you can do is be really patient with yourself. And this is part of that self-compassion. Maybe come up with something you can say to yourself to replace any self-criticism or negative self-talk. I like to use a phrase that I believe came from Tara Brach. I'm not 100% sure, but it's just simply placing my hand on my chest and saying, this is hard and I'm doing my best. And this is a mantra I use whenever I catch myself in a self-critical state. Of course, we don't always catch ourselves, but the more you practice replacing negative self-talk with a compassionate mantra, the more frequently you will notice yourself doing this, and eventually it becomes more of a habit than something you have to think about. Taking care of your physical body is the next tip. A lack of sleep, very, very normal, not only for those of us who are grieving, but for pretty much every human out there. Sleep deprivation is real and prevalent. And we know from research, and we also know from experience, that a lack of sleep can make it harder to see clearly, to make decisions. It can disrupt your emotional landscape, and a lack of sleep might make you feel more anxious, more depressed, more hopeless. And so doing things you can do to improve your sleep hygiene, which I talk about a lot in Awaken. In fact, that's, I think, the first line of defense I give to grieving people is learning how to sleep again, how to set up a sleep sanctuary in your bedroom, particularly if that room is associated with the person who died, like if it was a spouse. And taking care of your physical body through movement, through nutrition, through hydration. So self-care is the third tip. And I know that gets tossed out so often in grief support, but it gets tossed out a lot because it is the most important thing you can do. And it's the one thing you can actually take action on without having to change your philosophy, change your viewpoints, understand what's happening. Picking up a glass of water doesn't require adjusting your belief system. So doing whatever you can to care for your physical body is going to have effects on your emotional body as well. I mentioned earlier leaning on support systems if you're feeling isolated or lonely. If you are feeling like there is absolutely no one you can talk to, and by that I mean if you do talk to someone, they are maybe they don't understand, or they dismiss you, or you feel like you're just talking to a brick wall, then I really encourage you to reach out to a grief group, whether it's my grief group, or you check in with your local hospice, or make an appointment with a therapist. There are many ways that you can find somebody who understands what you're going through. The fifth tip is to express yourself creatively. And you don't have to be an artist to do this. In fact, in my grief groups, I always give people crayons, because crayons to me are the least intimidating art medium that there is. So whether it's just drawing a landscape of your grief, whether it's painting, writing, dancing, singing, doing something to tap into that creative part of your brain helps balance out the trauma. And when you create something, there is that felt sense of satisfaction that you have done something for yourself. And of course, we would not be going through a mindfulness and grief live stream without mentioning mindfulness. And so that is our sixth tip. And mindfulness is really about expanding your awareness. That's how I see it as it relates to grief. A lot of times grief focuses in our view, and the only thing that we can think about is what we have lost. Mindfulness allows us to pay attention to other things that might be neutral, like the fact that we have our feet on the ground, the fact that we are breathing, and might even widen out your perspective into being able to appreciate what you have left, which might be that best friend that you can talk to. It might be other family members that you can lean on. With mindfulness, it's not about forcing a feeling or forcing an opinion. There's no toxic positivity here. It's just about seeing clearly what is really happening, what is really available to you, and having compassion infuse all of that. A tip that was really well received this week in group is to set small, achievable goals. And that might be around something as simple as getting out of bed and washing your face. We talked about how things like even brushing your teeth, washing your face, showering, these really simple things can feel like an insurmountable task when everything around you has changed. And so doing just teeny things that might not seem to matter to other people that for you can check off as, hey, I did it. I recommend setting maybe just one thing a day. In fact, I do this on my whiteboard. I have business goals, but then I have a personal goal every day. And it might not be something huge. It's not usually like walk 10 miles, but it might be go outside and stretch, or, make sure to get 5 cups of herbal tea in. Just little teeny things that you can do. And acknowledge your progress, whether it's around those steps or going back through your grief journal and looking where you were, 5, 10, 12 months ago. Whether it's sitting down with a friend and just reviewing the day I experienced the loss to now, even if it's been a short period of time, you might notice some small changes. And, forgiving yourself for the things that you maybe don't feel like you accomplished, and letting those go and really focusing on what you are doing. So this is turning towards yourself in a really kind way. And kindness to yourself is actually the next tip. I think my brain must have been doing kind of a like what's related to this when I wrote this list, because being gentle with yourself, whether it's acknowledging the doubts you have around something or acknowledging what you've accomplished, that kindness is going to change the texture of how you're feeling about your self-efficacy and your self-confidence. And then the final tip in today's live stream, and probably my favorite because it is about journaling, is to lean into your journaling. Writing down how you're feeling, writing down your truth in and of itself can be incredibly helpful. However, if going to a blank page leaves you feeling overwhelmed and stressed, I always recommend using guided journaling prompts. And or if your writing feels like it's always the same, like your journaling is stuck in rumination, or it's always negative, it's always heavy, and you don't feel better or some relief or even a release after writing, definitely use some journaling prompts. And I have included, let's see, how many? 5 different journaling prompts that you can use in my latest blog post on mindfulnessandgrief.com. So if you go to mindfulnessandgrief.com and click on blog, or you could just click on the link that I'm going to paste I'm going to paste it in the comments right now. And I will post it also in the description of this. You can go and pick the journaling prompt that feels most relevant to you right now. And the 5 themes are as follows. The first is to express your grief, what you feel, how your grief is impacting you in a letter to your loved one, including maybe what you wish you could have done or said. The second one is exploring your self-doubt around a decision that you've made. When you dive into this particular prompt, you might want to not pick the decision that feels the most life-changing. You might want to pick something a little smaller, maybe around self-care, that if you reflect on, it'll be a good practice for how to work with self-doubt. This third one is about celebrating your strengths. The fourth one, and this is a really big topic that probably deserves its own live stream in the future, is addressing guilt, which again is common, unpleasant. None of us like it. It's an awful feeling. But the reality is the majority of people who have experienced a loss find something to feel guilty about. And that is just part of how our human brain is wired. And then finally, envisioning the future, writing about where you want to see your life or how you want to relate to yourself in terms of self-trust, and coming up with one small thing you can do to get there. So I hope that this live stream has been helpful to you. And again, check out the blog article at mindfulnessandgrief.com or in the comments section below. And I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.